Good morning and welcome back to the One Celtic Fans View this morning, Saturday morning. No football today for Celtic. We do play tomorrow, home game. Everyone will be looking forward to get to the first game of the year back at Celtic Park, I'm sure. And they would have liked it if we went back with a win for the first game of the year. But the first game back at Celtic Park is against St Mirren, and I can only see it going one way. St Mirren have been doing fantastic over the last up until they played Rangers, they were doing fine. They played Rangers and they won against Rangers. They managed to do what Celtic didn't. And someone that I know that's a big YouTuber that is a famous Buddies supporter decided to text me and message and tell me that. So cheers, mate. But it is a game that Celtic will win. I think that Brendan Rodgers and the team will be hurting from the game the other day, and they want to go out and put that right. It's very rarely, well, we did last season, we dropped points twice in a row, but I can't see it this season. But there is a question that has been lingering about, and I think that it's a very Celtic question. It's a very Celtic issue, and it's the battle of midfield. When we look at games not only in the SPFL, when we look at the way that Brendan sets the team up ultimately, we set up with a 4-3-3, which teams out with Scotland don't. You get a lot of European teams will play with 4-3-3, and it's you get a lot of teams in England will play that, but in Scotland, teams have decided that, you win the battle of midfield, you sit in front of Celtic. They've only got three in midfield, they've got three up front. But if you pack the midfield and you win the midfield battle, if you man-mark Callum McGregor, which we've known for a long time, as soon as you man-mark Callum McGregor, and then if you double up on Nico Kuhn, and if you double up on Dyson Maeda, you've got the midfield battle won. And Callum McGregor's been talking about it, and he says that we need to change things. The midfield battle, he says, whoever wins the midfield battle comes out on top. That certainly rang true on Tuesday. McGregor says, look, Rangers pressed aggressively and they disturbed Celtic's rhythm. Well, we all know that, and everybody knows that. Everybody knows to play like that against Celtic, and Brendan Rodgers does not change the system quick enough for me. Yeah, well, we set up. They were set up with a low block, and we were finding it hard to get through. We need to look at that. We need to tweak it a little bit, says Callum McGregor, to give ourselves a bit more comfort in the game and allow us to get the territory that will make it comfortable for us. So there was a couple of warning signs there in previous games, but we didn't do it. See this modern football nonsense, the sort of transitions moments. This terminology that sneaked into the game is starting to really do my head in. The transition from defence to attack. Fucking, it's football. Just get back to talking about and speak about it like football. This modern technology and all this fucking fancy transition BS that's come into the game. Could you imagine some great managers? Could you imagine Billy McNeil sitting back in the day and saying, it was good, we had some good transitions. Folk would turn around and go, the fuck is he talking about? Fucking good transitions. We got the ball for defence, we went up the park and scored. It was, do you know what I mean? Piss off. Anyway, there was a couple of warning signs there over the last couple of weeks. I said there's signs there that we have to fix it and fix it quickly as we can. Is it time? Is it time that we start dropping midfield players? Is it time that we start dropping midfield players? I'm going to start a poll. Alright, Rio. Oops. Two seconds, I'm just trying to do a poll for Try to decide on what players that I'm going to put in this. Right, there we go. Rio and who else? Right, there's a poll. What players should we drop in the midfield? That is the poll this morning. Just a quick one that was thrown together. What players should we drop in midfield? Because we lost the midfield battle. There's players that are sitting on the bench. Luke McCowan for one. And it'll be interesting to see what you think of this one. There's quite a few people on. It's quiet this morning, isn't it? What players should we drop from the midfield? And we'll see how many votes this gets. It's quiet this morning. I think people are a bit fed up of YouTube just now after the result. But anyway, we played for 5 minutes. Yes, we did. We were complete guff. We had such a bad off day. But when you have players like Rio Hatate having an off day, far too regular, and you expect your big players to perform. There's been too many times this season that the engine in the midfield for Celtic has not been to Celtic standards. And when I talk about Celtic standards, we can go back you can go back to 30, 40 years. We've always had fantastic generals in midfield that can take control of the games. I mean, you go back to more modern times when you had Paul Lambert came into Celtic to help stop them winning their 10 in a row. Yes, we stopped them winning a 10 in a row a long time ago. And then Celtic went on to get their second 9 in a row. Yes, their second 9 in a row as a club. And we're en route. I've got to say it, we're en route. We could be the start of another 9 in a row. Could you imagine the meltdown if Celtic do go on and win another 9 in a row? A treble of 9 in a rows. But anyway, if you look back to Paul Lambert, even Paul McStay, and players like that, you had Neil Lennon in that midfield. You know, you've had Stilly and Petrov in midfield, and it was players that had a bit of fight about them. In more modern times, we had Scott Brown, who pretty much dominated the game. He knew how to read the game. He knew how to control the game. He knew how to tell players where to move. Even if Scott Brown was getting man-marked and he was getting a right physical battle, he rose to the occasion. The current crop of midfield players, and it's a different generation, I know, but there's still hard-man players out there that Celtic could be getting in that midfield. And I know that we want to go for the flair-type player and all that, but ultimately, we've brought in players that are for the future. Paulo Bernardo, Arne Engels are going to be the basis of the team for the foreseeable future, but you always need that Roy Keane type person. I mean, you could even say when Roy Keane came to Celtic, it wasn't the best of times that he came to Celtic, and he shouldn't really have came to Celtic because he was done as a player. But you need that type of player in midfield. You need a Scott Brown. You need and for me, Callum McGregor's getting played in the wrong position. I understand why Brendan Rodgers and Ange put Cal Mack in that position, because of the experience that he's got in the game, and you're trying to give a player a bit of more of a longevity. But you need big players around you in that midfield. You need big players around you in that midfield that are going to fight for everything in front of you. There's no point having Callum McGregor sitting back. I mean, Callum McGregor always came through the system. He was always a left-sided midfield player, and he was always sort of a left-sided attacking midfield player. To bring him back into a position that was never natural to him during his career, and I mean, Scott Brown changed as a player. Right, Scott Brown changed as a player, and he had a fantastic end to his Celtic career, although the last season wasn't what he would have wanted. But you need better players that will fight for 90 minutes for you. Rio Hatate doesn't fight for the team for 90 minutes. Paulo Bernardo He's a foreigner that's came into the team, and he tries to play the European style of football. European style of football, you don't have to fight for everything for 90 minutes. It's a bit more subdued. It's a bit more, you're relying on everyone else in the team. In the midfield in European football, you can go missing. You can get yourself into positions where you know that you're going to get the ball and it's going to be a one-touch pass. Scottish football, you're not given the luxury of that. Teams are going to start cracking down on putting pressure on Callum McGregor, doubling up on wingers, and that's my takeaway. If you're any team in Scotland, you're now saying, this is how you hurt Celtic. Never mind sitting back in a back five. Never mind putting the low block thing that they're all talking about now. They're playing a low block. Right, putting 5 along the back. Rangers put 5 along the back at points in the game the other day. Other teams will say, right, you can sit with 5 at the back, but you need to smother the midfield. You need to smother the wingers. Double up on the wingers. They don't like it. They simply don't like it. And then when you double up on the wingers and you nullify Callum McGregor, you've got a little circle, you've got a gap right in the middle of the pitch, where Rio Hatate goes away out to the left or the right. He decides where he wants to play. And then you've got Paulo Bernardo, and you've got a massive gap in the middle. And then that's what wins the control of the game. And Rangers did that fantastically the other day. And other teams will start doing that. I think it's time to change up the midfield. We have to relax football in Europe. It is more relaxed. It's when you look at it, Scottish football is 100 mile an hour. And it's when you watch European football. I mean, I watch a lot of football in Europe. And it's not the shoulder charge tackling in midfield that happens in Scottish football. I mean, it's more easy on the eye, and folk will say, but that's what's good about Scottish football. And some people say, well, that's what makes Scottish football years behind everyone else, and that's why we're not that good in Europe, because we can't upper level to the game the way that they play in European football. But Hatate is an empty jersey, says AR. He doesn't deserve a start. McCowan should be starting before Rio. We could be starting and miss. We're starting to miss Matt O'Reilly's goals. Matt O'Reilly's goals from the midfield. Paulo Bernardo was meant to kind of step up to the mark for that, and he hasn't. Arne Engels, a young player as well, but he's not Matt O'Reilly's standard, is he? I think that there's once in a lifetime that you find a gem in football, and Matt O'Reilly was that gem. Can Celtic ultimately go out? But you've got to remember as well, Matt O'Reilly took over from where Jota left off. Jota was the one that was supplying the goals. Jota was the one that was supplying the assists. He took over where Jota left off the season before. Nobody's took up that mantle this season. Nobody's picked up that and said, I'm going to be the dominant force in this Celtic team. Whether it be what is this? Who knows? Whether it be Rio, you would have thought could have stepped up to the mark. Rio's always been that player. When he first came to Celtic, he scored a couple of cracking goals for outside the box. We've not had that. Every opportunity that Rangers had outside the box, they took a shot. That's the difference between the Celtic midfield and the Rangers midfield the other day, and I think that teams will have caught on to that. Every time that they got near the edge of the box, they took a shot. Celtic don't. The way that Celtic try and play, the only player that tries to take a shot really from outside the box recently is Luke McCowan and Callum McGregor. So for that, you're saying you're then coming to the conclusion that Luke McCowan needs to start more games. So Rio Hatate, you've got 2 players that are playing you've got 3 players that are playing in midfield. Obviously, you've got Arne Engels, Paulo Bernardo, and Rio Hatate all fighting for the same 2 positions. I think that it's time that Rio Hatate. I've said it all season. I think that Rio Hatate is coming to the end of his Celtic career. I think that he's coming. He's getting. Players have a longevity at Celtic, and for Celtic to move the player on and get the money that they want for him. And you've got to remember, for the past two summers, he's also spoke about the fact that he wants to play at a higher level. If you want to play at a higher level, you turn it on in the big games and you show, because you know that these are the games that are televised. You know that these are the games where you're going to get a lot of scouts coming to. and see just how you cope with the pressure of the big game environment. And there's no bigger game in Scotland than a Glasgow derby. Let's face facts. I mean, Aberdeen done really, really well at the first quarter of the season, but they've dropped like a ton of bricks. And I feel Aberdeen have let themselves down. Aberdeen have completely let themselves down. And considering that they didn't have European football, considering Aberdeen didn't have European football to contend with this year, I think that they've really let themselves down. But anyway, when it comes to Celtic, I think we do need change in the midfield. We need to go out and bring a player in. It's rather quiet this morning, isn't it, on YouTube? I think it's time that we brought a player in that just gives us a little boost in the midfield. You know, an older player that's maybe a couple of years older than Calmac, somebody that's in their early 30s, that's been there and done it and knows how to really bully a game in midfield, because let's face it, we need it. Anyway, let's jump into the comment section. The English game is fast like the Scottish, says T1. Andrew says, we never tested their makeshift defence. A couple of times we played it along and we caused them problems. The problem with players like Hatate is he doesn't get time on the ball and the game can be too fast-paced for him. It's interesting to hear that centre-half Dane Murray has been recalled by Celtic from his own loan at Queen's Park. That's because of Stephen Welsh going out on loan. That's the only reason he's been recalled. We need the Scottish contingent. Stephen Welsh was in the Scottish contingent for the Champions League squad. That's the only time that Welsh got to do anything. He has had he's had one or two games this season, but ultimately he's sitting on the bench going, I signed this 5-year deal last year, Brendan, and I'm not getting played. I'm not getting any game time at all. I need to be playing at this stage of my career. I think he's 24-year-old. He's at the stage where, look, I don't want to be sitting on the bench. I've done everything with Celtic over the years. I've won medals. I've won championships. Do you know, I've won trebles. I want to play football now. And Brendan will say, well, you're not first choice. Obviously, the conversation went along, you're not first choice, so it's going to be difficult to get you game time the way that you're wanting it. I said, well, can I go out on loan just to get games to the end of the season? And then we'll take it from there. That's the only reason that Dane Murray's been called back. The ex-St Johnstone manager that is at Queen's Park now, he was a little bit disappointed with the fact that Celtic did recall him. They were hoping that he was going to stay with them until the end of the season. He's, by all accounts, he's been good for Queen's Park, but ultimately, again, will Dane Murray be willing to sit on the bench at Celtic having had first team football? Celtic's got a real issue just now, and we all like, and Brendan Rodgers knows that we have to have squad rotation, but we don't have players that are good enough to be putting pressure on the first team players on a week to week basis. You know, it's all nice having a settled back two, and even Brendan Rodgers, I think he's not overly convinced with the three main defenders that we have just now. Cameron Carter-Vickers had a couple of mistakes in the derby. Austin Trusty was dropped again after doing absolutely hee-haw when it comes to the final just a month ago. And then you've got Liam Scales. Now, for all the love and all the good comments about Liam Scales before the game, and you need to play Scales, Scales is way better than Trusty. Scales in big games, and I'm talking about Champions League games and games like this, sometimes the fear factor comes into Scales. And I think that when you look at it, I think Brendan Rodgers knows that we need someone with a bit more European experience, big game experience, you know, a general in midfield. But it's whether the Celtic hierarchy will sanction that, because, I mean, allowing one player to go out on loan, Brendan Rodgers is going to get told, look, you've got umpteen defenders out on loan, you need to balance the books here. We need to either get these players off the books if they're not good enough for you. I mean, Gustav Lagerbielke, who's out on loan, I think Celtic should have sold him. I don't think that Celtic should have kept Lagerbielke on loan. I think we should have sold him and just let him move on. I don't think he's going to progress as a player to be the dominant type of Roy Aitken type player that we need a Bobo Baldi. We need a Bobo Baldi type player to play, a Joos van Halen type player. There's so many things that the Celtic squad need a bit more depth and strength. It's okay having all these players on the bench and players out on loan, but ultimately, if they're not good enough, sell them on so that it frees up the wages, so that it does free up the wages for us to go out and buy centre-half that Brendan really thinks, with experience. Going down the road of project players has held us back. I think it has held us back. And I think that the Brendan Rodgers will know that. When it comes to the midfield, you could say that Arne Engels is a project player. And never mind his price tag, you look at his age, he's 21-year-old. 21-year-old in that midfield in European football gets shown up. A 21, Paulo Bernardo, he's still young and inexperienced when it comes to Champions League as well. Rio Hatate was not experienced when he came to Celtic. He was not an experienced player at the highest level. So we're playing with a midfield who, when it comes to it, Callum McGregor has went through his entire Celtic career having midfield players that have stood up to the battle. They've stood up to the battle, and I think that we've got players in that midfield that are just not standing up to it at all, and they're getting found out. Anyway, AR says we only have 2 strikers in Kyogo and Ida. If you play 2 up front, or one gets injured, you're relying on a youngster. AR, I've said this before, we need 4 strikers at Celtic. We need to be able to change Brendan Rodgers needs to be able to tactically change the team. When we played that masterclass, and when we look back at the way that we played defensively in Italy, right, we weren't playing 4-3-3. We were a bit more compact. And I think that Brendan Rodgers tactically needs to acknowledge that. And it's not just him. I think that John... But then you could say, well, the same tactics worked the week before. You have to have the players... When you see that the players, so many players, are having an off day, you have to sometimes think, right, maybe we're going to go 4-4-2. Just to mix it up. Just to bring the players that bring the forwards. Sacrifice someone in midfield. Sacrifice Rio Hatate, right? For instance, if Brendan Rodgers had done this, for instance, right? Sacrifice Rio Hatate in that game. Get to half-time and you're thinking, Brendan Rodgers said it himself, we can't be as bad in the second half. And ultimately we were. He expected the players to go out and perform the second half. The players did not perform to him. So Brendan Rodgers should have, quarter of the way through the second half, should have went, do you know what, we're going to pull Rio Hatate off, and I'm going to put Adam Ida on, and I'm going to leave Kyogo on, and I'm going to see if they two can do something up front. I'm going to then pull the wingers. I'm going to pull the wingers back into the midfield position, and I'm going to strengthen up that midfield so it gives us a bit of a battle, so that then when we win the battle in the midfield area, we've got the power, we've got the strength, right? We've got the speed of Hatate and Kuhn to get up on the wings and to make a break, but then you've also got 2 strikers in the box. You've got 2 strikers heading into the box that you've got a bigger target to aim for rather than just the one striker. Brendan Rodgers has to do that. A good manager would do that. Do you know what I mean? And for Brendan Rodgers he is a fantastic manager, but sometimes the inability to, and I think he listens to, as good as the backroom staff are, I think he listens to them too much, and we can all see the changes that need to be made, but he lives and dies with the sword, and I expect him to go back to winning ways. And when we go back to winning ways the next couple of games, nobody's going to complain about the Sevco game. They're going to go, look, it was one of those games. But my thinking is we're having one of those games at the highest level too many times. Having one of those games, the amount of times that players haven't turned up in the midfield, and that was never an issue before. If one player, you would maybe have, in the past, you would have one player that would have a bad day in midfield. He would get hooked, and you would bring someone else on. We've been able to, the substitutes that we've had this season have been able to come on and change games. The fact that we had so many players having an off day is something that we really need to look at. And was it the fact? Was it just a simple fact that having no fans at Ibrox, was it as simple a fact as that? That the Celtic players didn't like the fact that there was any Celtic fans there. They didn't have any backup from, it could be something as simple as that. It's a mindset thing that Brendan Rodgers will have spoke about yesterday. Anyway, what players should we drop in midfield? 85% going for Rio Hatate, 6% going for Paulo Bernardo, 5% Kalmak, and 5% Arne Engels. Although there's not a lot of people online this morning. Thank you to everyone who is online this morning. Anyways, let's jump back into the comments section. Stephen Johnson was in first. Thomas was in. T1 is in the house. Liam Miles in the house. Morning to you. Brendan's in the house. Troop, 3 points tomorrow. 3 points tomorrow. And like shake Thursday's hangover away. Andrew's in the house. Says, I know what's happening. Bring Luke McCowan in from the start, CCV and Trusty, and move McGregor further forward. I think you're right, Thomas. I think Hatate's been poor for a while. Kalmark is rarely poor, says Big Dom. Kalmark's rarely poor, but Kalmark has passes that go missing because he doesn't have that quality in the midfield. And he has players that, Rio Hatate's passing was woeful. Rio Hatate's passing has been woeful for weeks and weeks. And how Brendan Rodgers is not seeing it is a different kettle of fish, isn't it? Andrew says he's mince. When he loses the ball, he doesn't try and get back. Talking about Rio Hatate. I'd keep Maida first choice. Adam, I'd keep Maida. I've had a choice of Japanese players. Yeah, Daisen Maida's about the only one that you would keep. How could you use a Wanyama and still think that we need to sort out teams sit right up in our centre half? It kills us. It does that. We need a tough midfield power to power buff. Yep, we do that. Michael says, morning Baz, Rio has been good for us, but he's definitely not been at his best recently. Think about Thursday. Do you think that we played so badly due to fatigue? No. I think that Rio Hatate has had moments of brilliance in games, but I think if you look at his stats if you look at how many missed passes Rio Hatate's had over the last month and a half, there's certainly something there. No academy players really get a chance. It's bullshit, says T1. Luke hasn't let us down. He knows the Scottish game, and that's why he should have got a shout, if you ask me. It would have given Luke McCowan needs more game time with Celtic to really make him grow into that midfielder that he can be. The fact that Rio Hatate gets a nod before him, I think, drop Rio Hatate, push Callum McGregor further forward into Rio Hatate's position, bring on Luke McCowan to sit in the holding midfield role, see how he goes with that, and then have either Paulo Bernardo or Arne Engels. You've got to remember, those two are young players as well. Generally it's a young midfield that we've got. But if they're young enough and good enough, they should be starting. Especially when you look at some older managers that would start younger players. Do you think we have the players to play 3-5-2? Does Brendan Rodgers have the balls? Have the balls to play 3-5-2 should be the question. Will Brendan Rodgers change it to a 3-5-2? It was interesting that Brendan Rodgers changed it to a 3-5-2 in pre-season for one game. And I thought, yes, this is going to be the season that he changes it. But with the fact that Rocco Vata had left Celtic by then, and Celtic did not get in the second choice striker that they wanted. They got in Adam Ida, but Brendan Rodgers wanted two strikers. We need more strikers at Celtic. It's as simple as that. Just to put pressure on them. We're going over all ground here. If Adam Ida starts, Keogh goes on the bench. There's not a third choice striker at Celtic that's putting that pressure on them to say, do you know what? If you're not having an off game, you're not going to be on the bench. You're not even going to make the bus. You're going to be sitting up in the stands. And we need that at Celtic. And I think Brendan Rodgers knows that. Bobo's going to get you, yep. I wish we had somebody like Bobo Baldi at Celtic. We only have two strikers in Kyogo and Adam Ida. Play two up front, one gets injured, then you're then playing a youngster. We need another decent striker. Yes, I think we all know that. We need a striker, and I think that Brendan Rodgers now has it. He has the data. He's a data-driven manager. Although he goes by instinct, but he is a data-driven manager. And I think that he's got half a season's worth of data to go to the board with Paul Tisdale and go, There's the data on the strikers. This is what we need. This is what we need. We need another strike. We've only got 2 strikers. If one gets injured, we don't have a backup striker. Ultimately, I think that you need 4 good strikers at a club, and then it's all about trying to keep them happy. Pistol Pete, does they like to spend? Yeah. What about coin throwing when you're 3 up? We spoke about that yesterday in one of the videos, and I put a video up of the person that threw the coin. You can actually see him throwing the coin on the video. So yeah, we spoke about that yesterday. I'm not going to give them any more airtime, and you can actually see the guy throwing the coin on the video. There's no pressure on you. Why try? Exactly, and I think that's the problem with a lot of the Celtic players. They know that. I think Rio Hatate knows that if he doesn't try 110%, he maybe make the bench, but then he knows he'll come on at some point. I don't think that we've got 4-2-4 Jock Stein formation. I don't think we'll go for that. Dave Morton's in the house. Liverpool will see Ange sacked in the Cup next game. That's the only thing keeping him in a job. We need a Victor Wanyama type player. Yes, we do that. Anyway, that's me done and dusted for this morning. Let's wrap up this poll. It's been a poll of not many votes this morning. It's very, very quiet on YouTube this Saturday morning. So a big thank you to everyone who has came and watched the video. What player should we drop in midfield? Rio Hatate gets 87%. Paulo Bernardo gets 4%. Kalmak gets 3%. And Arne Engels gets 3%. Also, only 83 votes this morning, rather than the 500-600 that we have been getting. Soakvanchu says, everyone can see Hatate has been shit, but Rodgers can't. It's a case of more pointed out to Rodgers, the more he's going to play him. I don't know. I'm not too sure. I think it's maybe trying to keep him in the public. Is it a case of trying to keep him in the public eye to get him the move? Ultimately, I think Rio Hatate's time's up at Celtic, whether it be this window or whether it be the summer, and it's going to be a case of if a bid. There's no solid bids. The problem that we've got is there's no solid bids came in for Rio Hatate as yet, and that's the problem. That is the issue. Is scouts from other team are looking at him and going, he's not really done it in the big games, is he? And they'll see the exact same things that we see, and it's like, are you going to spend 10 to 15 million on a player that you're like, too many missed passes, Anyway, as long as we win tomorrow, I fancy Hibs for a point. I'm not even working about it. Take it easy, Baz, and everyone. Have an absolutely fantastic day. Celtic 1888 gets the final words. And on that note, have an absolutely fantastic day. We will go. Is there any games on today in the SPFL? I don't think there is. Is there? Fixtures. Is there any fixtures? No, it's all Sunday games. It's all Sunday the 5th of January, so there's no even point in doing a sort of a full-time results score, because it's a full card tomorrow. Tomorrow starts off at 12 o'clock, Hibernian entertain the South Koreans. 2:30, Motherwell, Aberdeen. That's going to be a game and a half, because Aberdeen are in free fall. Celtic entertain St Mirren at 3 o'clock kickoff. Dundee United against Heart of Midlothian. That'll be a good game. That is a 3 o'clock kickoff. Kilmarnock Ross County. That's a 3 o'clock kickoff. And St Johnstone Dundee is also a 3 o'clock kickoff. I don't know if I'm going to be able to do a live after the game tomorrow, because it's Three Kings Day. It is Three Kings Day celebrations tomorrow, so we'll wait and see. Anyway, on that note, have an absolutely fantastic day wherever you are. Celtic fans all around the world. Where's the video? There we go. See you later.
Lit. Roll up to the party. Roll up to the party. Roll up to the party. Roll up to the lit. Roll up to the party. Roll up